Hi, my name is Karen Barksdale, and this is my presentation for the final project for Business 343, Employee and Labor Relations, Safety Gloves Discharge with Just Cause. Next slide. So the parties involved in this case are Erin McNamara. She is an employee with Brera Recycling Company's Los Angeles facility. There's Rafael Gomez. He is the general manager for the Los Angeles facility. And then there's me, Karen Barksdale. I am the Labor Relations Manager for Brera, and I have been asked to take a look at this case to decide whether Brera did have just cause in the discharge of Ms. McNamara. Next slide. Some of the main points I will go over during this discussion. I will go over her employment background, which included the violations and verbal reprimands that she has received, including a 3-day suspension with disciplinary notice, which did eventually turn into termination. I'm going to discuss a little bit about workplace safety, just exactly what is just cause, some causes that Brera has for immediate discharge, an example of another employee that was fired for just cause, my conclusion of whether I think Brera had just cause, and plan of action going forward. Next slide. So Ms. McNamara has been an employee with Brera for 20 years. She transferred to the Los Angeles facility from Long Beach back in January, and she is currently represented by the Local 37 of the United Paper Workers International Union. Some of her duties at Brera include taking newspaper bundle that are bound together by plastic straps. She is to cut those straps and then load the newspaper into the baling machine. She is also to sort through paper, bottles, and tin cans. And sometimes those tin cans do come into the facility with sharp edges, and sometimes those bottles do come in broken. And for those two reasons, we do require all employees to wear hard hats, safety gloves, and safety glasses with side shields. Next slide. So Mr. Gomez did have several conversations with Ms. McNamara due to her safety violations, including verbal reprimands for sleeping through safety meetings, failure to wear safety glasses with side shields, safety gloves, and hard hat. And also she was caught reading a copy of Sports Illustrated during working hours. Next slide. On October 28th, due to the numerous reprimands that she did receive, pertaining to safety and performance, Ms. McNamara was given a 3-day suspension, and during the suspension she did receive a disciplinary notice which had the following clause that said should she violate any Brera rules or regulations within the next 12 months that she would immediately be discharged from Brera. And at that time there was no grievance filed on her behalf by her union, but on December 9th, Ms. McNamara was observed by Mr. Gomez sorting through the material, and she was not wearing her safety gloves, and at that time she was terminated by Brera. At this time, Local 37 did file a grievance on her behalf. Next slide. The workplace safety is important because it does protect the employee and the employer both. And OSHA is a federal agency that does enforce laws regarding safety in the workplace. And they have established guidelines and safety standards that employers must follow. And Brera follows those standards by supplying safety equipment to their employees, holding safety meetings, and giving reprimands and disciplinary notices to employees that do violate those rules. Next slide. So just cause is the requirement that there must be a valid job-related reason for the employee to be disciplined or terminated. And when terminating an employee for just cause, the employer must prove that there is just cause. Next slide. So there is a method that was developed called the 7 Tests of Just Cause, and as long as an employer can say yes to these questions, then that employer has proven just cause. Some of those are: were the worker given advance warning of the consequences of their conduct? Was the investigation fair and objective? And was the employer's discipline non-discriminatory? Next slide. So Brera's contract, Article XX, Section 1, they have causes for immediate discharge. And Ms. McNamara did violate 5 of those clauses, including disobedience, neglect of duty, refusal to comply with plant rules, sleeping on duty, and the reading of magazines. Next slide. So an example of an employee that was an employer that fired their employee for just cause was a 37-year employee with a lead recycling plant. He was given 7 disciplinary notices within a year's time, including a 25-day suspension for not wearing his hard hat, his safety glasses, his respirator, and mask. And due to his disciplinary history, the number and seriousness of those violations, the employee was fired. And an arbitrator did find that the company was justified in the termination of the employee for just cause. Next slide. So as the labor relations manager for this case, I do conclude that Mr. Gomez did have just cause in this discharge of Ms. McNamara due to her poor performance and disregard for the company's policies and safety rules. Going forward, I do believe that Barrera does need to implement a training program when employees do transfer between locations, because some locations can have different rules. And also they should implement a reporting process that allows an employee to report any violation of safety rules to an employee, to their supervisor, to go ahead and get that corrective action taken care of. This is the end of my presentation. Thank you.